Hello everyone. Today I would like to tell a true story about a man drowning in debt and despair finds an unopened envelope left in his late father's belongings. Inside is a letter that makes him see failure not as an ending, but as the beginning of courage. It was a gray morning in late November, the kind where the clouds hung low, heavy with unspoken words, and the air smelled faintly of rain and regret. Daniel sat alone in his small apartment, surrounded by unopened bills scattered across the kitchen table like fallen leaves. The ticking of the clock was the only sound brave enough to fill the silence. Each second seemed to echo, failure, failure, failure. Once this room had been filled with laughter, with dreams, with music from a cheap radio his father gave him on his 21st birthday. Now even that radio was silent. The batteries had died weeks ago, and Daniel hadn't bothered to replace them. He leaned back in the chair, his eyes hollow, staring at the cracks forming along the ceiling. "This isn't what it was supposed to be," he whispered to no one. The business he'd started 3 years ago had collapsed under the weight of debt. Friends had drifted away, tired of promises and apologies. His father, the one person who never stopped believing in him, had passed away only a few months earlier. Grief and guilt had become his daily bread. He had nothing left to lose, but somehow that didn't make him brave. It only made him numb. Daniel opened a drawer filled with his father's old belongings, faded photographs, a worn leather wallet, a pocket watch that no longer ticked. Beneath it all, he found a small stack of envelopes tied together with a thin brown string. Most of them were old bills and letters from decades ago, but one envelope stood out, yellowed with age, yet unopened. The handwriting on the front wasn't his father's. It read simply, "For the one who needs to find hope again." Daniel stared at it for a long moment, unsure why his hands were trembling. He could feel something stir inside him, a faint whisper beneath the noise of his despair. He turned the envelope over. The seal was still intact, and for the first time in months, he hesitated, not out of fear, but out of something unfamiliar. Curiosity. Outside, the wind began to rise, brushing against the window like a quiet invitation. Daniel took a slow breath and opened the letter. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, fragile, yellowed, and trembling slightly in his hands as if it had waited too long to be read. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, not the rushed scrawl of modern life, but something from another time. Daniel unfolded it carefully. At the top, in faded ink, it began, "If you are reading this, it means you've reached the edge of yourself." His breath caught. He read on, "My name doesn't matter. I was once where you are, standing in the ruins of my own choices, certain that I had failed not just at life, but at being me. I thought the world would be better off without my noise. But one day, a stranger said something I'll never forget. Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's the beginning of courage." I didn't understand it then, but years later, I saw the truth. Sometimes the moment we break isn't the moment we're destroyed. It's the moment we stop pretending it's the first breath of something real. Daniel's vision blurred. He blinked hard, trying to keep the words from dissolving into tears. The paper trembled as he read further. "You will lose things, people, dreams, pieces of yourself. But what's meant to stay will not leave. And what's meant to leave is only clearing space for something you cannot yet imagine. Failure isn't the opposite of courage. It's the proof of it." He paused. Those words, the proof of courage, hit something deep, something long buried under months of shame and exhaustion. He could almost hear his father's voice in them. Not the exact words, but the same tone. That quiet strength, that unshakable belief that life could still be beautiful, even when it was hard. Daniel folded the letter and pressed it to his chest. For the first time in months, he felt something break inside him. Not the hard, shattering kind of breaking, but a gentle cracking open. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was the faintest flicker of light in a room long sealed shut. He looked around the apartment, the mess, the dust, the lifeless air, and felt a strange calm settle over him. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was listening. He whispered, almost to the air itself, maybe this isn't the end. The clock on the wall ticked softly. The world outside continued, ordinary, indifferent. But inside that small apartment, something invisible had shifted. A man who had lost all hope had just found a reason to breathe again. And the letter wasn't finished. At the bottom, a line was written in darker ink, perhaps added later. If you ever find this, pass it on. Someone else will need it too. Daniel stared at that line for a long time. He didn't know it yet, but that single sentence would change everything that followed. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, the letter open beside him, the city lights flickering like distant stars. The rain had started, a slow, steady rhythm against the glass, and with every drop, his thoughts grew louder. He read the letter again, and again. Each time a new meaning unfolded, as if the words were alive, speaking directly into the hollow places of his heart. He wondered who the stranger was, and why his father had kept the letter all these years, untouched, unmentioned, waiting. Had his father once stood in this same darkness too? Had he been saved by these very words? Daniel thought about the last conversation he'd had with him, his father's voice, raspy but calm. Son, the world doesn't end when your plans do. It ends only when you stop believing there's another way. At the time, Daniel hadn't understood. He'd brushed it off, too consumed by his own failures to listen. But now, in this quiet moment, it finally made sense. He stood up, walked over to his cluttered desk, and turned on the lamp. The warm light spilled over piles of unopened mail, old receipts, and crumpled sketches. Dreams he'd abandoned when the business fell apart. One of the sketches caught his eye, a small drawing of a cafe he once planned to open with his father, a place filled with books, music, and stories. They were going to call it the Quiet Lantern. Daniel traced the outline with his finger. The memory hurt, but it also stirred something alive. He whispered to himself, maybe. It doesn't have to be over. He reached for a notebook, one covered in dust, and began to write. Not plans, not strategies, just words, thoughts, gratitude, regret, hope. Everything that had been locked away came pouring out. Hours passed, but he didn't notice. The city slowly faded into dawn, and the light of morning painted his room gold. When he finally put the pen down, the letter from the stranger lay beside his notebook. Like an old friend watching quietly, he realized something then. The letter didn't save him. It reminded him he could still choose to save himself. And that choice, that small, trembling decision, was where healing began. Daniel looked at the final line again. If you ever find this, pass it on. He smiled faintly. Yeah, he whispered, I will. He didn't know who would need it yet, but he knew someone would. For the first time in a long time, Daniel stood, opened his window, and let the morning air rush in. The world felt new, not because it had changed, but because he had begun to wander where in the distance the church bells rang, soft, hopeful, like a beginning disguised as an ending. The following weeks moved slowly, but something inside Daniel had shifted. The mornings no longer began with dread. He still woke to the same small apartment, the same bills, the same gray light. But now, there was a quiet intention behind every breath. He started making his bed again. He cleaned the dishes he'd left for days. He even turned the old radio back on. And though the static still hummed through broken speakers, the faint music behind it felt like a heartbeat. Each action was small, almost invisible to the world, but to him it was proof. He was trying. The letter sat framed on his desk now. He read it every morning before starting the day, not as a ritual, but as a reminder that courage wasn't loud and hope didn't always roar. Sometimes it was just the act of getting up again and again, no matter how heavy the world felt. One evening, while sorting through a box of his father's old notes, he found a faded business card. Emma Carter, Community Center Outreach Program. On the back, in his father's handwriting, was a short note. "She helped me once. Maybe she can help you too." Daniel hesitated. Reaching out meant admitting he needed help, something his pride had long resisted. But then he remembered the letter's words, the beginning of courage. He picked up his phone and dialed the number. A warm, steady voice answered. "Community Center, this is Emma." For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. Then quietly, "Hi, my name's Daniel. I think you knew my father." There was a pause, a soft intake of breath on the other end. "Your father, he was a good man," Emma said gently. "He used to volunteer here. Always said hope was meant to be shared." Daniel's throat tightened. "I didn't know that." Emma smiled through her voice. "He never talked much about himself, but he did talk about you." The words hit like sunlight breaking through clouds. That call led to another, then to a visit. And soon, Daniel found himself helping out at the community center on weekends, fixing shelves, serving coffee, listening to stories from people who, like him, were learning to begin again. Every face carried a different kind of pain, loss, loneliness, regret, but beneath it all, the same fragile spark of wanting to believe again. And one afternoon, as he was closing up, he noticed a young woman sitting alone by the door, holding her head in her hands. Something about her, the quiet shaking of her shoulders, the exhaustion in her eyes, reminded him of himself on that November morning. He sat down beside her, unsure of what to say. Then he remembered the letter. Daniel reached into his bag, pulled out a copy he had made, and slid it across the table toward her. "I don't know who wrote this," he said softly, "but it helped me when I needed it most. Maybe it can help you too." The woman looked at the envelope, then up at him. Their eyes met. Two strangers, each carrying invisible storms, and for a moment, the world felt still. He smiled. Sometimes hope doesn't start with answers. It starts with a letter. Weeks later, winter began to fade. The air softened, and the first signs of spring peeked through the city's worn edges. Small buds on trees, sunlight slipping between gray buildings, laughter echoing from corners that had long been silent. Daniel walked down the same street he had once trudged through with empty pockets and a heavier heart. Now his steps were slower, not from weariness, but from awareness. He noticed things again. The rhythm of footsteps on pavement, the scent of roasted coffee drifting from a nearby shop, the way the world seemed to whisper that life always finds a way back. At the community center, the woman he'd given the letter to, her name was Maya, was helping paint a mural on the outer wall. A cascade of colors danced across the bricks, hands reaching for light, faces turned toward the sky. In the corner of the mural, in small, deliberate letters, she had written, "Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's the beginning of courage." Daniel stood silently, watching her brush glide over the wall. The quote, the same one that once pulled him from the edge, now belonged to the world. Emma walked up beside him, her hands stained with blue paint. "You know," she said softly, "your father used to tell me that the smallest acts of kindness travel farther than we ever will. I think he'd be proud of you." Daniel smiled, though his eyes glistened. "He always believed in light," he said, "even when the room was dark." Emma nodded. "And now you're passing it on." That evening, after everyone left, Daniel stayed behind to lock up. The mural gleamed beneath the streetlights, vibrant, alive. He sat on the steps for a while, the cool night air wrapping around him like a quiet embrace. He took the original letter from his jacket pocket, the one written by the stranger, and read it once more. The paper was creased and fading, but the words still held power. Failure isn't the opposite of courage, it's the proof of it. He smiled through the ache. The letter had traveled from a stranger to his father, from his father to him, and now to others like a river carrying light through broken places. He folded it carefully and looked out into the street, where a young man was walking by. Head down, eyes tired, shoulders heavy with invisible weight, Daniel hesitated for a moment, then called out, "Hey," he said, stepping forward with a gentle smile. "I think this might be meant for you." The young man looked confused, then curious, as Daniel held out the envelope, the same one that had once saved him. In that moment, Daniel realized something profound. Hope doesn't belong to one person. It's meant to be shared, carried, passed on, like a letter written by countless hands, across time, across pain, across silence. The man took the letter with trembling fingers. "Why are you giving this to me?" he asked. Daniel's smile deepened, his voice soft but certain. "Because someone once gave it to me." The streetlight flickered above them. The world was quiet but alive, breathing, glowing, forgiving. And as Daniel turned to walk away, the faintest whisper of his father's voice echoed through the wind. "You did it, son. You found your courage." He closed his eyes, letting the night air fill his lungs. The same air that once felt too heavy to breathe. Now it felt like freedom. Thank you for spending your time listening to the entire story I shared. See you in the next video. If you find it helpful or enjoyable, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much.